So, welcome to Friday on the Subs Week on the Pagan Perspective. I'm Yeka, and this week we're talking about polar masculine and feminine forces. So, I was very excited to read this topic, which I think is really interesting. And the viewer asks basically to us in our practice, what are the polar masculine and feminine forces, and what does it mean for us? So, to answer that, I'm going to talk a little bit about masculine and feminine. And for me, when I think of masculine and I think of feminine, I think of traits that come from maleness and traits that come from femaleness. So to talk about that, we really have to talk about male and female. And male and female in nature is an incredibly new and incredibly, it's a minority in life. And we can say that either from a perspective of time period, being that male and female have to come about from sexual reproduction, which has only been around, say, if life is about 4 billion years ago, sexual reproduction has only existed for about 1 billion of those. So that's pretty small. And if we look at the number in nature of individuals or species, the vast, vast majority of them are reproduced through asexual means. So male and female are very unique, very isolated part of nature, even though we look around and what we see is we see things that are male and female because it's the scale that we're living on. But if we start looking at how many of us are mammals, how many of us are animals at all, and then many plants, but not all plants, and that encompasses basically most of anything that is sexual, that reproduces sexually and therefore can have a male or a female. But in my body right now, so you're looking at me and you see one individual, and looking around you can see a couple of other individuals. You see this little bush here and the cottonwood back there. Don't know if you can see any of the animals moving around, another tree. These things we have, actually I don't know about these trees if they're specifically male or female, if they have both parts on their flowers. But anyways, you see just a couple of individuals. But what you're actually looking at is trillions of individuals, because in my body is filled, there are more bacterial cells in my body, and bacteria are little life forms, they're little individuals, than there are actually my own cells according to what my DNA is. And that's the same with every single individual. We're completely filled with this other life that we don't see on a normal basis, which is non-sexual. There's no male and there's no female. So most of nature isn't divided into male or female in that way. The second thing to talk about a little bit with male and female and the ideas of the qualities that we associate with them is that these qualities tend to be, for instance, the protective and aggressive being male qualities, whereas the nurturing and giving and all of that being feminine. When we start to look at other beings, other species that also have male and female, we see that those same qualities don't always apply. So, for instance, if you look at many bird species or you look at many insect species, their females are going to be behaving in a way that we might look at within a human context as being very masculine. So the idea, I guess what I'm getting at is the specific qualities that we assign to male and female, and thus masculine and feminine, are rather unique, or not the only way in other animals. So we come to an issue of looking at nature and seeing that most of nature doesn't have male and female, and that what we qualify as being masculine or feminine are traits that are not necessarily the same in every species. They're not necessarily always the same. So for me, when I don't look at masculine and feminine as being polar for that reason. And nature isn't a nature isn't represented through masculine and feminine energy. I definitely think that there are polar energies that work, negative and positive, for instance, when we get down to the atomic level, but not necessarily masculine and feminine, because as some of the folks before me have talked about, there are those traits, both of those traits in us, and I think that it's much more fluid. So all that being said, for me, masculine and feminine in my practice, I don't use as much because I would like to try and stick to understand humans through nature's context as opposed to trying to understand nature through a human context and seeing, classifying male and masculine and feminine that way for me is a very human context. Now, all that being said, I understand the purpose and the attraction to it, because as humans, one of the ways in which we understand the world is through metaphor, is through story, and relating things in a way that we can understand. So understanding things the way our species works makes a lot of sense. For me, doesn't do much for me. I enjoy the images of the green man or the mother goddess and those sort of images representing these traits, but I don't think that they are. I don't think that they're anything more than us recognizing traits and assigning them to different ideas. So for me, there's nothing about this that is male or female, masculine. I mean, in other languages, if you switch into Spanish or Welsh, then yes, this is going to have a male or female noun. But for me, there's nothing about it that's different than it is a rock. And the same thing with really anything else. If we look at the tree, or if we talk about forces maybe larger like the wind or rotations or light and dark, that sort of thing. So I hope that this was easy enough to understand. So yeah, I hope you guys have a great week. All right.